The screens went bright all at once. Every phone, every television, every computer on Earth showed the same thing. A face appeared that was not human. The creature had 4 eyes and skin that looked like moving water. Its voice came through every speaker on the planet at the same time. Admiral Richard Hayes was in a meeting when it happened. The hologram appeared in the center of the room without warning. He stood up fast, his hand moving toward his weapon before he stopped himself. This was not an attack, at least not the kind he could fight with guns. The alien spoke in perfect English, though its mouth did not move the right way for the words. It said its name was Ambassador Thel of the Corinthian Collective. It represented 47 different alien races from across the universe. They had been watching Earth for a long time. They had seen humanity fight wars, build cities, and reach into space. Now they had a challenge. Every 1,000 years, the aliens held a tournament. Species from across the stars competed in 5 trials. The winners earned respect and freedom. The losers became servants. Earth had been chosen to represent all carbon-based life forms. Humanity had 1 week to decide if they would accept. Lisa Morgan was on the International Space Station when the message came through. She was a lieutenant commander in the newly formed Space Defense Force. She watched the alien's face on the screen and felt her stomach turn. The creature explained the rules with a voice that sounded almost bored. 5 trials would test intelligence, strength, tactics, technology, and unity. If humanity refused to compete, Earth would be sealed behind an energy wall for 1,000 years. No one could leave. No one could enter. Lisa looked at her crew. They were all staring at the screen with wide eyes. One of the younger officers, a man named Peter, asked what they should do. Lisa did not have an answer. This was beyond anything they had trained for. Down on Earth, Colonel Jason Miller was already working. He ran the Defense Intelligence Division, a secret group that studied threats to human survival. He had people all over the world gathering information. They recorded every second of the alien broadcast. They analyzed the translator technology. They looked for any sign of weakness or deception. Jason sat in his office and watched the message for the 10th time. The alien said humanity had been chosen because they were aggressive and resourceful. The Corinthians wanted to see if humans were as dangerous as they appeared. Jason understood what that meant. The aliens were afraid. They wanted to control Earth before humans became a real threat. Dr. Amanda White was not military. She was a scientist who studied communication between cultures. The government had asked her to join the response team because she understood how different groups of people talk to each other. Now she had to figure out how to talk to aliens. Amanda sat in the emergency council meeting and listened to the generals argue. Some wanted to refuse the challenge. They said humanity was not ready to compete against species that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. Others said they had no choice. Being trapped behind a wall for 1,000 years would destroy human civilization. People needed to explore, to grow, to reach for new things. Taking that away would break something important in the human spirit. The President of the United States, Victoria Cross, listened to everyone speak. She was a tall woman with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had been a senator before becoming president. She had led the country through economic crashes and natural disasters. But nothing had prepared her for this. Victoria knew what she had to do. The decision could not be hers alone. This affected every person on Earth. She called for a global vote. Every nation would decide together. It took 3 days to organize. People argued in the streets, on the internet, in their homes. Some were excited. They saw this as a chance to prove human worth. Others were terrified. They thought accepting the challenge would lead to slavery or worse. When the votes were counted, the answer was clear. 73% of humanity chose to fight. They would accept the alien challenge. They would compete in the tournament. They would show the universe what humans could do. Victoria gave a speech that was broadcast everywhere. She stood in front of cameras and spoke without notes. She said humanity had always faced impossible odds. They had survived ice ages and plagues. They had crossed oceans in wooden boats and walked on the moon. This was just one more challenge. One more mountain to climb. and humans had never backed down from a challenge in their entire history. Admiral Hayes watched the speech from his office. He felt pride swell in his chest, but also fear. The president had made a promise to 8 billion people. Now someone had to keep that promise. The military would have to find people who could compete against aliens. They would have to train them in 1 week for trials no human had ever seen. Lisa Morgan got the call 2 hours after the president's speech. They wanted her back on Earth immediately. She was being considered for the competition team. Her skills in zero-gravity combat and her quick thinking made her valuable. She packed her bag and took the next shuttle down. Jason Miller already had files spread across his desk. He was building profiles of every candidate. They needed the best humanity had to offer. Not just soldiers, but scientists, athletes, engineers, anyone with skills that might help. The trials would test everything. They could not afford to guess wrong about what was needed. Amanda White was writing a report about alien psychology. She had studied the broadcast carefully. The way the ambassador spoke told her things. The aliens expected humanity to refuse. They thought humans would be too afraid to compete. That arrogance might be their weakness. If the aliens underestimated humanity, that gave Earth an advantage. The week passed in a blur of activity. Every news channel showed nothing but coverage of the selection process. People gathered in public spaces to watch as candidates were chosen. The world held its breath. When the alien ship appeared in orbit exactly 7 days later, humanity was ready with an answer. President Victoria Cross transmitted a message that the whole world heard. Earth accepted the challenge. Humanity would send their champions to the tournament, and they would fight with everything they had. The alien ambassador appeared on screens again. This time there was something different in its expression, something that might have been surprise. It said the tournament would begin in 30 days. A transport ship would come to collect Earth's team. The trials would take place on a neutral station far from any home world. Richard Hayes stood in the command center and watched the alien ship disappear. 30 days to prepare for something they did not understand. 30 days to train for trials designed by civilizations millions of years old. 30 days to get ready to save humanity from 1,000 years of isolation. He looked at the faces around him. Lisa Morgan, Jason Miller, Amanda White, and dozens of others who had been selected. These people would carry the hopes of an entire species. The weight of that responsibility was crushing. But humans had carried heavy weights before. They would carry this one too. The challenge had been made. Humanity had answered. Now came the hard part. The selection center was built in the Nevada desert in less than a week. It was a massive compound with training facilities, laboratories, and living quarters for hundreds of people. Security was tight. No one got in or out without clearance from the highest levels of government. Captain Daniel Rivers arrived on the first day. He was a Navy SEAL who had served in more combat zones than he could count. He was 32 years old with scars on his hands and a calm way of moving that came from years of dangerous work. When the government called and asked if he wanted to save the world, he said yes without thinking twice. He met Katie Walsh in the main gym. She was running on a treadmill at a speed that made him tired just watching. Katie was an Olympic athlete who had won gold medals in 3 different events. She was 28 and had trained her whole life to be the fastest and strongest she could be. When she saw Daniel watching, she smiled and ran even faster. Professor Henry Brooks was not like the others. He was 56 years old with gray hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He had spent his life studying physics and energy. He had helped design the new power plants that ran half the country. When they asked him to come to Nevada, he left his laboratory and got on a plane the same day. Dr. Michelle Carter was a neuroscientist, which meant she studied how the brain worked. She was 41 and had published more research papers than anyone else in her field. She knew how to make people think faster, remember more, and push past pain. The military wanted her to make the team better than human limits allowed. Commander Jacob Foster was in charge of tactical training. He had lived on Mars for 2 years running the military base there. He knew how to fight in zero gravity and how to survive when everything went wrong. He was a short man with a loud voice and eyes that saw everything. The candidates both feared and respected him in equal measure. Sophie Graham was an engineer who built things other people said were impossible. She was 33 and had designed most of the equipment on the Mars base. She could look at a problem and see 10 different solutions in seconds. The government gave her a blank check and told her to build whatever the team might need. Kevin Price worked with computers and artificial intelligence. He was 29 and had started programming when he was 6 years old. He had created software that ran satellites, predicted weather, and controlled defense systems. Now he was building something that could think and learn faster than any AI ever made. General Peter Stone watched everyone from his office above the training floor. He was in charge of the whole operation. Every decision went through him. He had spent 40 years in the military and had seen every kind of crisis. But this was different. This was not just about winning a war. This was about the survival of the human race. Dr. Rebecca Lane was the team psychologist. She talked to every candidate and decided if they could handle the pressure. Some people were brave in combat, but fell apart under other kinds of stress. Some were brilliant, but could not work with others. Rebecca had to find the ones who could do everything and still stay sane when the weight of the world was on their shoulders. The training was brutal. They woke up before sunrise and worked until late at night. Daniel led them through combat drills in environments that changed without warning. One minute they were fighting in a desert. The next they were underwater. Then in zero gravity. Then in toxic atmosphere suits. They never knew what was coming next. Katie pushed everyone to their physical limits. She created workouts that left even the strongest candidates gasping for air. But she also taught them about efficiency, how to move in ways that saved energy, how to use momentum instead of strength, how to make the body do things it did not think it could do. Henry gave lectures on physics and chemistry and engineering. He taught them how the universe worked at levels most people never thought about. He showed them how to recognize alien technology and maybe understand it. He explained that knowledge was just as important as strength in unknown situations. Michelle worked with each person individually. She taught them meditation techniques to stay calm under pressure. She showed them memory tricks to remember complex information instantly. She even taught them how to control their own pain response. The brain was powerful if you knew how to use it right. Jacob ran tactical simulations constantly. The team fought against computer programs that learned from their mistakes. Every time they won, the program got smarter. Every time they lost, Jacob made them analyze what went wrong. He wanted them to think like warriors and scholars at the same time. Sophie built equipment in her workshop 20 hours a day. She created suits that could adapt to any environment. She designed tools that could be reconfigured for different uses. She made weapons that were non-lethal but effective. Everything she built was light, strong, and flexible. She knew they could not prepare for every situation, so she made things that could adapt to anything. Kevin locked himself in a room with dozens of computers. He was building an AI that would help the team during the trials. It had to be smart enough to solve problems, but simple enough to not need massive computer banks. He worked until his eyes burned and his fingers hurt from typing. But slowly the AI took shape. He called it Oracle and taught it to learn from everything. The candidates came from everywhere. Scientists and soldiers, athletes and engineers, doctors and pilots. They were men and women of every age and background. They spoke different languages and believed different things, but they all had one thing in common. They wanted to prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars. Rebecca watched them bond over the weeks. At first, they were strangers competing for limited spots on the final team. But as they trained together, fought together, and struggled together, they became something else. They became friends. They became a unit. They learned to trust each other with their lives. General Stone made his final selections with 2 days to spare. The team would be 12 people, 6 men and 6 women. Each one brought different skills. Each one covered weaknesses the others had. Together they were more than the sum of their parts. Daniel would lead the team in combat situations. Katie would handle physical challenges. Henry would solve technical problems. Michelle would keep everyone mentally sharp. And 10 others would fill specific roles that might mean the difference between winning and losing. Sophie gave them the equipment she had built. Suits that fit perfectly and could change properties based on need. Tools that were small but incredibly useful. Weapons they hopefully would not need but carried anyway. She had worked miracles in 30 days. Kevin uploaded Oracle into portable devices each team member would carry. The AI was not perfect, but it was good. It would analyze situations and offer suggestions. It would translate alien languages if possible. It would be their advantage when everything else was equal. The night before the alien ship arrived, the whole team sat together in the common room. They did not talk much. There was nothing left to say. They had trained as hard as possible. They had prepared for every scenario they could imagine. Now they just had to wait. Daniel looked around at the faces of his team. These people were the best humanity had to offer. If anyone could win this tournament, it was them. But he knew the aliens had been doing this for thousands of years. They had advantages humanity could not match. Technology beyond human understanding. Species designed for specific tasks. Hive minds that thought as one. But humans had something too. They had the ability to adapt, to improvise, to look at impossible situations and find a way through. Every species in the universe had evolved to fit their world. Humans had evolved to change their world to fit them. That had to count for something. The alien ship appeared in orbit right on schedule. It was huge, bigger than any human vessel. It sent down a transport shuttle that landed in the desert near the compound. The door opened and a ramp extended to the sand. General Stone walked the team to the shuttle. He shook each person's hand and looked them in the eye. He did not give a speech. Everything important had already been said. He just nodded and stepped back. The team walked up the ramp together. The inside of the shuttle was strange. The seats were wrong shapes for human bodies. The lights were colors humans did not have names for. Strange symbols covered the walls. This was their first real look at alien technology. It was beautiful and terrifying at once. The shuttle door closed. The engines hummed with a sound that made their bones vibrate. Then they were moving, rising into the sky faster than any human aircraft. Through the windows, they watched Earth get smaller. The blue planet that held everything they had ever known. Everything they were fighting for. Katie reached out and took Daniel's hand. He squeezed back. Around them, other team members held hands too. They were leaving home to fight for home. They were 12 people carrying the hopes of 8 billion. The weight was crushing. But they would carry it. Because that was what humans did. They carried impossible weights and kept moving forward anyway. The shuttle left Earth's orbit and jumped to faster than light travel. The stars stretched into lines. They were on their way to the tournament. On their way to prove humanity's worth. On their way to either save their species or doom it to 1,000 years of isolation. The challenge had been accepted. The team had been chosen. Now the real test would begin. The tournament station was beyond anything the humans had imagined. It orbited a neutron star spinning so fast that time itself moved differently nearby. The station was enormous, big enough to hold 1 million people. It had been built by civilizations so old that Earth was young when they first reached the stars. The human team walked through corridors made of materials that should not exist. Walls that were solid but let light pass through. Floors that felt soft but never bent under weight. Doors that opened when you thought about walking through them. Everything was designed by minds that thought in ways humans could not understand. They saw other teams for the first time in a massive gathering hall. 47 different species from across the universe. Some walked on legs. Some floated in the air. Some were made of energy that held a shape through force of will. Some were so small they needed special platforms to be seen. Others were so large they had to stay in special rooms. Daniel studied each team carefully. He tried to understand their strengths and weaknesses. The Vreks were 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin like metal. They looked like they could tear a human apart without trying. The Zephyr were beings of pure thought who controlled robotic bodies. They had no physical weaknesses because they had no physical form. Katie watched a team of creatures that looked like giant insects. They moved in perfect coordination, never bumping into each other, never hesitating. She realized they were a hive mind. They thought as one being in many bodies. How could humans compete against that kind of unity? Henry was fascinated by the technology everywhere. He saw power sources that produced endless energy. He saw materials that could not be broken. He saw devices that translated between species who did not even communicate with sound. He wanted to study everything but knew they had no time. The Corinthian ambassador appeared in the center of the hall. It was the same creature that had challenged Earth. Its 4 eyes looked at every team at once somehow. It spoke and the words came out in every language. It welcomed them to the tournament and explained the rules. Each trial would test a different aspect of civilization. Intelligence, physical ability, tactical thinking, technology, unity. The trials were designed to be impossible for any single species to excel at all of them. The goal was to find the most balanced and capable race. The winners would earn respect and freedom to move among the stars. Everyone else would be ranked and placed in the hierarchy. The first trial began immediately. Each team was led to a separate chamber. The human team found themselves in a room that seemed to have no walls. The floor was solid, but everything else was darkness. Then lights appeared and shapes formed out of nothing. They were looking at a maze, but it was not a normal maze. The walls existed in multiple dimensions at the same time. A path that looked open from one angle was blocked from another. A wall that seemed solid could be walked through if you approached it the right way. It was a puzzle designed to break minds that thought in only 3 dimensions. Daniel looked at his team. They all looked as confused as he felt. This was beyond their training, beyond anything humans had built or studied. Henry stepped forward and stared at the maze. His mind worked on the problem like an equation. If the walls existed in multiple dimensions, then the solution had to involve thinking about space in ways that made no sense. Michelle suggested they map what they could see first. Katie ran through the maze, touching walls and calling out which ones were solid. Sophie used her equipment to measure distances that did not match what their eyes saw. Kevin had Oracle analyze the geometry and look for patterns. The AI found something. The maze was not random. It followed mathematical rules. If you could understand the rules, you could predict where walls would be solid and where you could pass through. Henry started writing equations on his tablet. The numbers were complex, but they told a story. They had to treat the maze like a relay race. Each person would solve the part that matched their way of thinking. Henry calculated the paths. Michelle memorized the sequences. Katie ran the routes at full speed. Daniel led them through the sections that required quick decisions. Sophie modified their equipment to detect the dimensional shifts. Kevin had Oracle guide them around the worst tangles. They moved through the maze faster than seemed possible. Each person trusted the others completely. When Henry said a wall was not really there, Katie ran through it without hesitating. When Michelle said to turn left into what looked like solid rock, Daniel did it without question. They were 12 people thinking as one. The human team emerged from the maze in 3rd place. 2 other species had finished faster. The Zephyr had used their advanced minds to see all dimensions at once. The Krex had natural senses that detected dimensional boundaries. But the humans had done something the judges noticed. They had adapted their thinking in real time. They had learned how to see what they could not see and trust what made no sense. The second trial was different. It tested physical ability in an environment hostile to life. The teams were transported to a planet with gravity 3 times Earth normal. The atmosphere was toxic. The temperature swung from freezing to boiling, and they had to cross 50 miles of terrain while being hunted by artificial creatures designed to kill. This was where Katie shined. She had trained her whole body for extremes. She knew how to move efficiently in high gravity. She taught the others to take short steps and stay low. She showed them how to breathe in the thin oxygen mix their suits provided. She turned physical suffering into a technical problem to solve. Henry modified their suits as they went. When the temperature dropped, he rerouted power to heating. When it rose, he found ways to cool them down. When the toxic air started eating through filters, he built new ones from materials they found on the planet. He was not as strong as the others, but his mind kept them alive. The creatures that hunted them were fast and deadly. They had claws that could cut through metal and could sense body heat from miles away. Daniel organized the team into defensive positions. They moved in a pattern that kept everyone covered. When creatures attacked, they fought together. No one tried to be a hero. They protected each other. Michelle kept everyone focused when the pain got bad. The gravity made their muscles scream. The temperature extremes made their skin crack and bleed inside the suits. The constant fear of being hunted wore on their nerves. She talked them through meditation techniques. She reminded them why they were there. She kept their minds sharp when their bodies wanted to quit. The human team finished in 5th place. They were not the fastest or the strongest. The Vrex had completed the course in half the time, their metal skin immune to the temperature and their strength making the gravity irrelevant. But the humans had finished. They had survived, and they had done it by working together in ways the other species did not seem to understand. The alien observers were taking notice. Between trials, the Corinthian Council met to discuss what they were seeing. Humanity should not be competitive. They were a young species with primitive technology. They had no natural advantages, no telepathy, no hive mind, no bodies designed for extremes. Yet they were performing better than predicted. One council member said it was luck. Another said the humans were clever but would fail when the trials got harder. But a third member, an ancient being that had observed 1,000 tournaments, said something different. The humans were dangerous because they did not know they should lose. They looked at impossible challenges and simply started working on solutions. They adapted faster than any species the council had seen. Back in their quarters, the human team rested. They were exhausted and hurt. The trials had pushed them beyond what they thought possible. But they were also proud. They had competed against species millions of years more advanced and held their own. They had not won yet, but they had not lost either. Daniel gathered everyone together. He told them the next trials would be harder. The aliens would start taking them seriously now. The challenges would be designed to exploit human weaknesses. But he also said something else. The aliens had a weakness too. They were arrogant. They expected species to compete in predictable ways. Humans could use that against them, Katie agreed. The physical trial had taught her something. The other species relied on their natural advantages. The Vrex used their strength. The Zephyr used their minds. The hive races used their perfect coordination. But when something went wrong, they struggled to adapt. Humans adapted constantly because they had to. It was their survival trait. Henry was already thinking about the technology trial that would come. The aliens would expect humans to try to build weapons or ships. They would judge based on what humans created compared to advanced technology. But what if humans built something the aliens had not thought of? Something that solved a problem in a new way? Michelle reminded them all to rest. The mind needed sleep to work properly. The body needed time to heal. They had done well in the first 2 trials. But 3 more were coming. Each one would test them in different ways. They needed to be ready. Sophie and Kevin worked late into the night. They analyzed everything they had seen, the materials used in the station, the technology in the trial chambers, the equipment other teams carried. They were looking for patterns, for rules, for anything that might give humans an edge in the trials to come. The human team slept. The 3rd trial changed everything. The teams were brought to a massive chamber that contained hundreds of holographic displays. Each screen showed a different battlefield in space. Ships, planets, stations, all part of a massive simulation. This trial would test tactical thinking and strategic planning through warfare scenarios designed by the most advanced military civilizations in the galaxy. General Peter Stone had sent detailed instructions before the team left Earth. He had predicted this trial would come. Warfare was how species proved their strength across the universe. He had taught them strategies that human militaries had developed over thousands of years of conflict. Now they would see if human warfare could compete against alien tactics. Each team commanded a fleet in the simulation. The goal was not to destroy enemies but to achieve specific objectives. Capture a station. Protect a convoy. Break a blockade. The scenarios changed constantly. The computer opponents learned and adapted. Victory required more than just firepower. It required thinking several steps ahead. Daniel took command naturally. He had led soldiers in real combat. He knew how to make quick decisions under pressure, but he also knew when to listen. This was not a one-person task. He split the team into groups. Katie and 3 others managed fleet movements. Henry and 2 others analyzed enemy tactics and found weaknesses. Sophie and Kevin worked on the technology side, using Oracle to predict opponent strategies. The first scenario put them against a blockade. Enemy ships surrounded a planet and nothing could get through. Most teams tried to fight their way past using superior numbers or firepower. The Vrex simply smashed through with their massive war vessels. The Zephyr used advanced shields to slip past undetected, but Daniel saw another option. He sent most of his fleet to one side of the blockade, making it look like a direct assault. The enemy ships moved to intercept, bunching up their forces. Then he sent a small, fast group through the gap on the other side. The blockade broke, trying to defend both positions. The human fleet got through with minimal casualties. The judges watching made notes. Sophie noticed something during the second scenario. The enemy AI followed patterns. It had been programmed by species who thought warfare worked certain ways. Attack patterns were logical. Defense formations were standard. Retreats followed predictable routes. The AI was sophisticated, but it thought like the species that built it. Humans could exploit that. Kevin had Oracle study every battle the humans fought. The AI learned what worked and what did not. More importantly, it learned what the enemy expected and what surprised them. It started suggesting tactics that made no logical sense but worked because they were unexpected. Humans had always won wars by doing things enemies did not predict. The third scenario was different. The humans had to protect a convoy through hostile space while enemy forces hunted them. Most teams formed defensive walls around the convoy and fought their way through. The humans tried something else. They split the convoy into smaller groups and sent them on different routes. They used decoys and false signals. They made the enemy chase ghosts while the real convoy slipped through. Henry realized the simulation was not just testing combat. It was testing how a civilization actually thought about conflict. Did they seek total victory or strategic success? Did they care about casualties or just winning? Did they see warfare as glorious or terrible? The judges were watching more than just tactics. They were watching values. Daniel made a decision that shocked everyone. In the fourth scenario, they were losing badly. The enemy had superior numbers and better position. Most teams would fight to the last ship, but Daniel ordered a retreat. He pulled his fleet back, regrouped, and attacked from a different angle. He gave up ground to save lives and then took it back when conditions were better. The alien judges conferred among themselves. This was not how most species fought. Warriors sought glory and death. Hive minds sacrificed individuals for the collective. Machine races calculated acceptable losses. But humans retreated when they were losing and came back when they had advantage. It showed strategic thinking over emotional response. Michelle noticed something about the other teams. The aggressive species always attacked head-on. The defensive species always built walls. The sneaky species always used deception. Each race fought according to their nature. But humans used all tactics depending on the situation. They were not locked into one way of thinking. The fifth scenario put them in an impossible position. They had to defend a station against overwhelming force. There was no way to win through combat. Most teams fought anyway and lost gloriously. The humans did something different. Daniel opened communication with the enemy. He negotiated. He offered a deal that gave both sides something. The enemy forces withdrew without firing a shot. The judges stopped the simulation. For the first time in tournament history, a team had completed a combat scenario without fighting. The Corinthian ambassador appeared before all the teams. It announced that the third trial was complete. The humans had placed first, not because they were the best warriors, but because they understood something other species did not. War was not about fighting. It was about achieving goals. The best victory was one where no one had to die. The wisest general was one who won without battle. Humanity had demonstrated strategic thinking that went beyond simple conflict. They had shown wisdom that came from thousands of years of terrible wars that taught them the cost of victory. The fourth trial tested technological innovation. Each team received identical raw materials and 3 days to build something that would advance their civilization. The judges expected weapons, engines, shields, things that made a species more powerful. That was what every team had built in every previous tournament. The human team gathered in their workshop space. They had materials that could be formed into almost anything. They had tools that worked at atomic levels. They had computing power that exceeded anything on Earth. Sophie looked at the others and asked what they should build. The obvious answer was a weapon, something to show human ingenuity in warfare. But Henry disagreed. He said weapons would not impress the judges. Every species here had weapons more advanced than humans could imagine. Building a slightly better gun would not matter. They needed to build something different, something that solved a problem in a way aliens had not thought of. Katie suggested building something for exploration, a suit or vehicle that could go places other technology could not reach. Michelle thought about medicine, a device that could heal injuries or cure diseases. Kevin wanted to build an AI that could think in truly new ways. They all had good ideas, but nothing felt right. Rebecca had been quiet during most of the tournament. As the psychologist, her role was supporting the team mentally, but now she spoke up. She said the biggest problem she saw in the universe was not weapons or speed or power. It was understanding. 47 species competed here and barely spoke to each other. They did not share ideas. They did not learn from each other. They stayed separate because they could not truly communicate. Daniel understood immediately. They should build a universal translator. Not just a device that converted words, but something that allowed true communication between any intelligent species regardless of how they thought or spoke. A tool that could break down barriers that had existed for millions of years. The team worked for 3 days straight. Henry designed the core technology using principles of quantum communication. Sophie built the hardware using the advanced materials they had been given. Kevin programmed Oracle to serve as the translation engine, learning languages and thought patterns in real time. Michelle added elements that translated not just words but concepts and emotions. Katie even added physical gesture recognition. The result was a small device that looked simple, but contained revolutionary technology. When two species used it, they could understand each other completely. Not just the words, but the meaning behind them. The intentions, the cultural context, everything that was lost in normal translation. The judges evaluated each team's creation. The Vrex had built a weapon that could destroy planets. The Zephyr had created an engine that traveled faster than thought. The Hive races had made devices that enhanced their collective minds. Every team had built something that made them individually stronger. Then the judges looked at the human device. At first they seemed confused. It was not a weapon. It did not provide power or defense. It did not make humans faster or stronger or smarter. What was the point? Then one judge asked for a demonstration. Daniel activated the device and spoke to a judge who communicated through color changes. For the first time in that judge's life, another species understood them perfectly, not through a crude translator that approximated meaning, but truly understood every nuance and subtlety. The judge was silent for a long moment. Then it asked to speak with other judges. The demonstration continued. Species that had never been able to communicate suddenly understood each other. Old conflicts based on misunderstanding were revealed as simple translation errors. Ideas that could not be shared before now flowed freely. The implications rippled through the entire tournament. The Corinthian Council met for hours. They had expected humanity to build weapons or defenses. They had expected humans to follow the pattern of every other species. Build. The fifth trial was announced to all teams simultaneously. It would test species unity in a way that had never been done before. Each team would remain on the tournament station, but they would be connected to their entire homeworld. The trial required coordination between the champions and every member of their species. Billions of individuals would have to work together to solve a puzzle so massive it spanned across light years. For most species, this was simple. Hive minds thought as one across any distance. Telepathic races shared thoughts instantly. Machine civilizations operated through synchronized networks. But humans had none of these advantages. They had only radio signals and computer networks. They had 8 billion separate minds that had to somehow coordinate perfectly. Lisa Morgan floated in the International Space Station, watching preparations unfold across Earth. Every communication satellite had been repurposed for the trial. Every computer network linked together. Every screen on the planet would show part of the puzzle. This was the largest coordination effort in human history. If they failed, it would not be because 12 people were not good enough. It would be because humanity itself could not unite. The trial began at exactly midnight Greenwich time. A structure appeared in space near the tournament station. It was a planet-sized sphere covered in symbols and patterns. Sections could only be activated by coordinating actions between the station and homeworld simultaneously. The puzzle was designed to be impossible without perfect communication across vast distances. Daniel looked at the structure through the station windows. It was beautiful and terrifying. He could see other teams already working, their homeworlds communicating through telepathy or quantum links. The humans had to do it the hard way, through voices and data streams, through 8 billion people choosing to cooperate. On Earth, every city became a coordination center. People gathered in public spaces, in schools and homes. Everyone had a device showing part of the puzzle. The structure was divided into sections. Each section connected to specific locations on Earth. New York handled one part, Beijing another. London, Tokyo, Mumbai, Sao Paulo. Each major city controlled puzzle pieces that had to align perfectly with all the others. Katie was coordinating the physical movements on the station. As sections of the sphere activated, team members had to move to specific positions. She ran the patterns over and over, memorizing where everyone needed to be. On Earth, athletes and dancers in stadiums created matching formations. Their movements mirrored what the team did in space. Millions of people moving in sync across the planet. Henry worked on the mathematical elements. The puzzle used equations that required solving billions of calculations simultaneously. On Earth, every computer, every phone, every device with processing power worked on parts of the solution. Students in classrooms did calculations by hand. Programmers wrote code that distributed problems across networks. Scientists in laboratories checked results. The entire species became one massive computer. Michelle focused on keeping everyone calm. The pressure was crushing. 8 billion people watching 12 representatives. 12 people depending on 8 billion to help. The weight could break anyone. She spoke to the team constantly, reminding them to breathe, to focus, to trust the people back home. On Earth, counselors and teachers did the same. They kept people focused when fear tried to take over. Sophie modified their equipment to receive signals from Earth more clearly. The tournament station was far from home, and normal communications would have terrible delay. But she found ways to compress data, to predict what was needed before signals arrived, to keep the flow of information smooth. On Earth, engineers did the same. They built relay systems that boosted signals. They created networks that rerouted around failures. Kevin had Oracle processing incoming data from Earth at incredible speeds. The AI translated human solutions into actions the team could take. It found patterns in the chaos of 8 billion voices. It turned crowd noise into clear signals. On Earth, people used social media and messaging apps to share discoveries. Artists created visual guides that crossed language barriers. Musicians made rhythm patterns that helped synchronize timing. The puzzle was vast beyond understanding. It had sections that required strength to move physical components. Other sections needed quick calculations. Some parts demanded artistic creativity to see patterns. Others required people to trust invisible connections. It tested every aspect of what made a species civilized. The Vreks struggled because their strength meant nothing when precision was needed. The Zephyr found that pure logic missed artistic elements. The hive minds moved perfectly but could not improvise when unexpected problems appeared. Each species had advantages but also limitations. Humans were different. They had no natural telepathy, so they invented communication networks. They had no hive mind, so they chose to cooperate. They had no perfect synchronization, so they adapted and improvised. Every limitation became a challenge to overcome creatively. A section of the puzzle required music. Specific tones played in exact sequence across multiple locations at once. On the station, team members had instruments Sophie had built. On Earth, orchestras in concert halls played their parts. Street musicians contributed notes. Children with recorders in schools added harmony. Millions of voices sang together. The music that emerged was chaos that somehow became beautiful. Another section needed colors arranged in patterns that spanned continents. Artists painted murals in cities. Farmers planted crops in specific layouts visible from space. People wore colored clothes and stood in formations. Satellites captured images from orbit and fed them into the puzzle. The entire planet became a canvas. A massive calculation stumped the team until a child in Australia posted the solution online. She had seen the pattern while playing a video game. Her answer spread across the internet in seconds. A retired mathematician in Argentina verified it. A programmer in India coded it. A student in South Africa implemented it. The solution emerged from collaboration across ages and cultures. Daniel watched sections of the sphere light up as problems were solved. The humans were not moving as fast as some species, but they were not slowing down either. Every obstacle met with creative solutions. Every setback turned into a new approach. 8 billion minds working not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. The trial reached a critical point. A section required simultaneous action by everyone. The team on the station and every person on Earth had to do something at exactly the same instant. For hive minds, this was simple. For humans, it seemed impossible. How could you get 8 billion people to act together with no telepathic link? The solution came from an unexpected place. Every culture on Earth had traditions of group synchronization. Concerts where crowds clapped together. Sports events where stadiums cheered as one. Religious ceremonies where congregations moved in unison. Humans had been practicing unity their whole history. They just had to do it on a global scale. A countdown appeared on every screen. 10 seconds. People in every country prepared. Athletes ready to jump. Musicians ready to play notes. Artists ready to press buttons. Scientists ready to activate equipment. 987 Daniel and his team positioned themselves. 654 Katie took a breath. 3, 2, Henry closed his eyes. 8 billion people acted together, not because a hive mind controlled them, not because technology forced them, but because they chose to. In that instant, humanity moved as one through pure will and coordination. The section lit up. The puzzle accepted the solution. The Corinthian judges watched in silence. They had designed the trial to be nearly impossible for individualistic species. They expected humans to fail, but humanity had shown something the judges had never seen before. True unity achieved not through biology or technology, but through choice. 8 billion separate minds deciding to work toward one goal. The puzzle continued for hours. Earth never stopped working. When some people grew tired, others took their places. When one approach failed, different groups tried new methods. The planet operated like a body where every cell knew its purpose, not because they were programmed that way, but because they understood what was at stake. Finally, the last section activated. The sphere lit up completely, glowing with light that could be seen across star systems. The trial was complete. The human team had finished. Not first, but they had finished. They had proven that a species of individuals could achieve unity when it mattered most. The judges deliberated while teams waited. The results would determine the hierarchy of civilizations for the next 1,000 years. Every species had shown strengths and weaknesses, but only one could be declared the winner. The Corinthian ambassador appeared before all the teams. It spoke in a voice that carried weight of ages. The tournament had revealed much about each civilization. It had tested aspects of society that went beyond simple technology or strength, and after careful consideration, the judges had reached their decision. Humanity had won, not in every individual trial, but in the overall demonstration of what a species could achieve. They had shown adaptability in the maze, perseverance in the hostile environment, wisdom in the tactical simulations, innovation with the universal translator, and unity that came from choice rather than compulsion. The ambassador explained something them